Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to G&G, Gil, and Gurpreet's live show. I was going to say LinkedIn, but it's live in all three different platforms. Thank you for tuning in. We have a great segment. I think I always say that, but we have a great segment planned out today, and it's around the hot topic that everybody's talking about. You see it on LinkedIn all the time. Now, recently with vaccinations happening, especially here in Ontario, as well as all over Canada and US, is obviously pretty well ahead of us. And I think they're already reopening some of the offices, and people are, I think, planning to go back to work. There's much talk around this. So Gail and I decided that'd be a good segment to talk about this on returning back to work. So Gail, actually, I'm gonna let Gail introduce the topic since he came up with the whole topic title. So Gail, take it away.
Thanks, Gurpreet. I appreciate that. So this topic is really important because it reminds me of a quote that's come up numerous times for me throughout the pandemic, which is that we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. Mm-hmm. And the last 14 months have had different impact on different people. And so that's why the first thing is that I want to talk about this is how you return to the office is more important than when. Because when you return to the office in one form or another for most companies isn't inevitable. It will happen at some point for most companies. Other than the few companies that have decided that at this point, you know what, we're going remote forever, this is for us. For those returning to an office, it's a matter of when. However, how you return to the office will impact the reactions that people have, and it will impact the likelihood of your people, being a part of what's called the Great Resignation that people are expecting over the next 6 months, because people need to feel comfortable. And so I started with that quote because here's the thing. There are some people who in the last 14 months haven't missed a day of work because of the pandemic out. Whether, it be sanitation people, whether it be grocery store workers, they haven't had what's really for the rest of us the luxury of being able to stay at home.
Yeah.
And so they've had one journey that, to be honest with you, the going back to the office for them, there isn't a going back to the office. They've been at the office.
Yeah.
Which makes it particularly interesting for companies and in groups. I was speaking with one municipal group a couple of weeks ago about their plans, because they have some people who are like that group that I just described. And those people have minimal or no fear about going into work because they're used to it. Then they have a lot of people who are in another group, which are the group that they haven't stepped foot in an office in 14 plus months. And the reality is that length of time, that protracted length of time, changes people's experiences and perceptions about the office. Some people don't realize and never realized how much they love the office. Some people are so excited because they miss the people. Those are the lucky ones. On the other hand, there's also a significant number of people who have tremendous anxiety and trepidation about going back to the office, because going to the office means sitting in an environment where you're not used to being around people who aren't from your home. And I can especially speak for people in the Greater Toronto area where you and I live, which is, for most people, especially those that don't drive themselves in, there includes a commute with public transit.
Yeah.
Which is something that even if you feel comfortable sitting in an office with people you know are vaccinated, it still raises a certain level of concern, which is all a long way for me of saying how you return to the office needs to start with one word: empathy. It needs to start with an understanding that every group is different, every individual is different. And we can't be making the decisions HR alone. We can't be making the decisions just as a leadership team. These decisions need to be made in as much as possible in a design thinking way, in a user centric way of understanding that how people return to the office is going to change how, or for the better or for worse, how they perceive your company. I spoke to a person, this was months and months ago, and this was an area in the States where a person on a Tuesday night was told, okay, Wednesday morning, everybody's supposed to come into the office.
Yeah, you can't do it that way.
The manager then ended up going into the office against his own desire because he was scared of going to the office. But the problem is that his team was even more scared. And so there were team members of his that he let off the hook, not going. So he sort of took one for the team, that because his team members weren't going to be there, he felt he needed to be there. Side note, pretty much everybody at the company and their family ended up getting COVID.
Oh, wow. Again, I think that that speaks to poor planning, or maybe reactive to the fact that people are getting vaccinations, but how many are not? And I saw this interesting post a few days ago on my LinkedIn through a connection, about the vaccination, and this person's not willing to meet even family members if they're not vaccinated. And then she proposed a question about the workplace, like how would people feel about those not into vaccination, right? I'm not really, but I ended up getting it anyways because I want to travel. So I'm gonna have to get it. Might as well get it now. Now, yeah, that fear. We've been, as much as people, I've seen these topics come up, like as much as people might seem excited about the reopening and offices being open and, oh, I can't wait to get into the office. I think what a lot of people are not talking about is, well, will you feel comfortable coming in? But also further, what does that look like though? What is the requirements going to be? Because I was hearing on 640 on the radio talk that even if reopen happens, there's going to be all these measures that companies probably have to take in place, especially like, let's talk about Toronto downtown, the buildings. There's going to be like, is the mask going to go away? Like that was a hot topic a radio show was covering. Like, sure, people getting vaccinated, but what about the masks? Like, how long will we have to still wear the masks? So I think a good question is when companies are going to look at doing this is actually what you said. Don't, like, leaders shouldn't just say, let's do this. Get your employees involved and ask them, because and I don't think it should be the way this other company did it, where, hey, tomorrow you're coming into the office, because first of all, there's employees with kids. What if the kids are online schooling? Because here in Ontario, as we know, we had an option, right? A lot of parents had options of either sending the kids to school in school or do it online, and like whatever your choice was, you made that decision. But what if a parent has kids at home and they're doing online schooling? Then what? Like, they can't just pick up and go the next day, right? For me, like, okay, I'm fortunate enough. I've been virtual for many years, so I don't have to worry about this, and my team doesn't have to worry about this. But going into a client office, sure. Am I going to jump the gun to go to a client office right away? I don't think so. I think I would want to ask them what measures they're taking. I don't think I can ask how many employees have been vaccinated. Now let's talk about vaccination. Are employers even allowed to ask employees?
See, I can't speak to the law. I can't speak to the law, but I think
that's against the law.
But I understand that. But the thing about it is, what can be done for the fact that we tell employers they want to create a safe space, how valuable it is to create a safe space. If I know there are people around me that aren't vaccinated, or there's a risk, well, I'm never necessarily going to feel comfortable being around these people and being around them without a mask. Because that's a very difficult thing for an employer, because how do you reconcile, on one hand, saying you're not allowed to mandate that people be vaccinated, But then on the other hand, you have people that will never feel safe in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
How do we reconcile that for people that have 12, 14 months of fear built up? And the longer that you're away from work, the harder it becomes. That was one of the insightful things I was taught when I did training around some training talking about when people are on leave for a variety of reasons, health leaves and most work leave. And one of the suggestions was to try in some way, as safely as possible, bring them back to work as soon as possible, not for the standpoint that you're trying to get them to work quickly, because it could be something very alleviated, something very simple, but more the fact of the longer they're away from the environment, the greater the fear builds up.
It's called the Back to Work program.
Back to Work program. And so, absolutely. And so right now, we have full companies who have this Back to Work program. And as we've been talking, a range of impacts on them. You have one person who's, their suit and tie is at the door and their bus pass is at the door because they're ready to go as soon as it can happen. There's another person who's living in fear of this moment because they don't know when it's going to happen, have no clarity, but they know at some point they're going to have to integrate back into this world that to them has now been created as fearful.
What's going to happen is companies going to have to develop back to work programs. That's going to be the best step to take to bringing people back to work, is actually planning it right now. Back to work program, and it can't just be a generic basic and here we go. It's going to have to integrate with each employee's needs. You can't just develop one. So like we used to in HR, we do this depending on your role, and I've done this my entire career in HR, is bringing employees back from leave, short-term leave, long-term leave, disability leave, workplace accident leave. And you have to work with, there was a whole requirement I had to ask an employee coming back, what's your limitations, this whole thing, and integrate them slowly, step by step. You don't just throw them in to the role. You have to slowly integrate them back in, and then put a plan together to how successful, to ensure that they're successful coming back into the role. And I think companies are going to have to do this. I think it's the most important step right now for any company, is to develop back to work plan. A strategic planning is so key to the success of bringing employees back safely, even for mental safety, right? As you pointed out, a lot of people may not feel safe to come back. What does that commute look like for individuals? Are someone's going to drive, or is someone going to take the bus? And what does those risks look like if someone's going to take the bus? Some people may not be happy to take a bus because you don't know who you're going to be sitting next to, right? So the whole planning. What's interesting, before coming into our show today, something that's been floating in my head ever since we talked about we're going to cover this topic today. I'm so curious to know the legal requirements. Can companies now ask and make it mandatory that the employees come back to work now that employees had been working from, this is about the individuals that are working from home and have been working for 14 plus months. I'm so curious. It's been in my head. I'm like, I wonder if you can actually force your employees to come back. What's going to be legal requirement around that?
Can they? Whether it's legal or not, they will be able to do it. I'll say that much. Whether it's legal or not, they will find ways. Those leaders, I call them leaders loosely, but those executives who want their people to be back in the office, even if they won't be legally allowed to do it for one reason or another, they will make it punitive to not be in the office. They will make it so that, because they will find ways that if the law's holding their hand one way, they will find a way to make it difficult. There are a lot of laws that are out there that, as you know, as an HR professional, just because it's a law, doesn't mean leaders know it or care about it. How many laws are broken in the hiring process around, protected classes on a daily basis in Ontario, right? Because people either don't know or don't care about the law. There's a question here about how IT recruitment will look post-pandemic. It's interesting. I think for the most part, it will remain flexible. I think the smart companies recognize that flexibility is needed, and those companies that aren't flexible are going to be punished for it. So I think it will be a balance thereof with some more remote, because I think a lot of companies have recognized the value in not having to hire, if you're in Toronto, but you're able to hire somebody from Northern Ontario who has the exact same skills. For them, there's a logic there. So I would lean in that direction.
I think first question would be, why are people returning to office if employees are doing same work from home? Some companies like Facebook announce employees. Yeah, you know what? That's what I mean. Like, can you make your employees come back to work if they've been working home for 14 plus months? And a lot of companies, I wouldn't say a lot, but actually maybe it's a lot. I don't know what the stats are, but so many companies are actually looking into this and considering flexible hybrid program where you can be in the office, you can work from home, flexibility. Some companies, there's a guy on my LinkedIn owns and runs his own company, and I really love what they did. They actually did a survey with their employees and asked the employees, and majority of them said they want to work from home with the flexibility of coming into the office or working with their teammates. But they also said that doesn't mean that we have to be in the office to work with our team. We can pick any spot and work with our team. So what that company did was they opted out to let go their office space. So they're saving tons of rent money. They're going remote forever. And then obviously if employees want to meet and have those meetings in person, they'll book those facilities accordingly. They also, what they did was, I love this part, they actually, because they're saving so much money on rent, they increased employees' pays. They also, not pay, they gave allowances about, I think, $1,500 to every employee for them to set up their office space to make it look pretty and stuff. So they gave this to every employee. They increased the benefits package because they have more money now, that the rent space. So those are two different things that they added, and it was and I think it was a brilliant idea. Was they talked to the employees.
And that's exactly it. That's the heart of it. When, I came up with this title for the topic of how you return to the office is more important than when. Please leave that one up, because I want to talk to Sandeep's point for a moment. But when I came up with that, the point is how you return to the office for every company is going to be slightly different, except it all needs to start with asking, with that empathy, with understanding that every group is different, every individual is different. So that's the employee side of it that you're talking of, understanding their perspective. What do they want? What works for them, right? Do we want 3 days a week, 5 days a week, complete flexibility, all from office? Understanding that. And then Sandeep has a great point here, that it's also why. What is the purpose from the organization's perspective? Why are they returning to the office? If the employees are doing the same work from home and being equally productive from home, then the organization starts to question whether or not it should be in the office. Now, at that point, however, that's where it needs to be balanced with the employee side. Because think about it, this very real possibility. The organization sees the same productivity on work from home. However, employees see greater mental health struggles because of disconnection. They see longer working hours because every research, every study I've shown that people working remotely through this pandemic are working at least 45 minutes a day longer than they were when they were working in the office. So just because it looks good to the company doesn't mean it's the right thing. And that's why I love what you said. And that's why it's so important to balance that. What's the right thing for your company and your people. Because every company at this point is going to be different. Some companies actually aren't doing the same work from home. The structure and the leadership and the culture and all of that is just not geared toward working from home. And the only way they can figure it out is getting back in the office. I fear for them long term, but that's how they're created right now.
Shouldn't they have created the work from home environment by now? It's been 14 plus months.
But here's the thing. So many leaders and so many employees, more so even than leaders, have pivoted to a work from home environment in technology and concept only, yet still expect people to be on their computer from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. They still expect to have the same expectations that they have. And the reality is, and comes from people who've been working remote well before pandemic, is that the benefits of remote work aren't that you're just lifting and shifting work in the office and you're sitting at home. That's not the benefit. That's not the pivot. The pivot is moving to more of an outcome-based as opposed to an effort-based, moving to an outcome-based recognition, moving to a combination of synchronous and asynchronous communication, giving people the flexibility that, you know what, as long as you get the work done, I don't care if you work from 5 a.m. till 10 a.m. But that's the thing is,
I never understood.
A lot of leaders are stuck on that, and they haven't pivoted in mindset.
I don't. Okay, I've been doing this before pandemic. I still, when you brought up the whole like time, I still don't understand that concept. Like, why does it matter? Someone works 8 to 4, 9 to 5, as long as the work gets done. So when I hire people for my company, even for my dad's companies, when I was running a couple of his businesses, I had a rule though. I told them they can't come before, like that time I was working in the office with my father. So I had a rule, you can't come before 10, but I don't care when you come, when you leave. I don't care if you show up to work. If you don't want to come and you want to work from home, that's your choice. I'm not going to monitor you. I'm not going to micromanage you. As long as the work gets done, how you do it, what time you do it, I don't care. Unless we have deadlines or we have a client meeting, whatever the case is, that's a different story. But I never, and I had the most productive employees, outcome, quality-wise, efficiency-wise, everything. Like it was bang on. Why? Because I didn't micromanage. I didn't care what time they came. I didn't care what time they left. I didn't care what time they took their breaks, as long as they took the break. Because I developed a really bad habit of not taking breaks. So I was like, no, you gotta take your breaks, lunch breaks, anything. And I don't care when you come. I don't care when you go. I don't care if you come to work or not. If you want to work from home, go ahead. And even now, still same thing. That's for both of my businesses. Same rule. I don't care. I don't care. You tell me your schedule. I don't even need to know your schedule.
You're an outlier though. That's the thing that's, and I've discussed this with you before, is that because you experience what you've created or the experiences that you've had, the reality is that's not the norm. That isn't the norm. That people, so many leaders look at time in the seat as the value to the company. It doesn't matter what you're doing for 10 hours a day, but if you're showing up so much after me and you're leaving at like, I don't know, something crazy like 5 o'clock, then you're not getting enough work done. So that's why I say, when you say they should pivot, conceptually, they've pivoted on a technological sense, but they've tried to have the exact same environment, and it just doesn't work that way. They're too stuck in their ways. Whereas the companies that have found benefit from it are the ones that have found the way of, where is the improvement in working this way, and where do we need to stick to our old ways? Finding that balance. That's what's key. So that's why a lot of them haven't pivoted.
It's also that mindset, right? Like a lot of people are too stuck to traditional old school of work conditions that they can't adjust to the fact that, and there's proven research on this. And mine's not even about research. Actually, talking about research, there's proven research that, let's say someone's working a typical 8 hours, they're only productive 5 or 6 hours. That's it. So technically that whole 8 hours of work, they're not really working 8 hours. They're only productive. And there's a whole research on this. I don't know what it looks like currently.
And I think 5 or 6 hours is on the high end. I think like having the 5 to 6 hours of real productivity in a workday is actually on the high end. Before we stop, there's a LinkedIn user here. I don't know who put it, but this is a really, really interesting comment. And this is not actually the first time I've heard of such things coming up. Right? Because I've definitely heard of resentment from grocery store workers who their lives have been put at risk throughout the pandemic, made by executives who have been sitting comfortably at home.
Yeah.
And so this is a huge factor for people to understand. And again, it goes back to my first thing that we're not all in the same boat. If you're bringing people back to the office, but you have 100 people in a big, computer farm, that you've got a whole all in one open concept office, in the decisions being made by the HR person who has their own quiet office in behind a door, in the executive who has their office behind the door, that will naturally create some resentment. And it's normal, it's rational even that will be noticed by employees. That if you're going to ask employees to put themselves at risk in some way, keeping yourselves away from that same risk is going to demotivate them. One of the things that has been beneficial to a lot of people, in a lot of leaders, the way they've acted, and that I've heard great stories of leaders talking about how we are all in this together. Leaders talking about how the pandemic has impacted them, right? Because you know what, nobody's immune to the effects of this pandemic and the results of it.
It's impacted every single one of us on different, not like, I can't say my impact and your impact is the same, right? Like mentally, I don't think there's not even one single human being out there that has not mentally been impacted by the pandemic in the last 14, 15 months that we've been in it or still in it. And for me, it's been like a yo-yo, right? Like I'm great and kick, and then I go back to the low, like what the hell is this? And then I'm great again. And it's like, but it's also the back-to-back lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, and then it starts to get you. So it's great initiative on those leaders who are willing to openly talk about this with their employees, like, hey, this is how I'm being impacted, right? So saying we're in it together and then not even talking about it and act like you're fine 24/7, I think that's a bunch of bull, because I don't think any single one human being is fine in this pandemic.
No, we're not. So we're just about out of time, but as always, that half hour flew by. This is, I really believe this is going to, the way companies return to the office is going to impact them for years to come, because for years to come, I truly believe companies' employer brand, the foundation of it will be, how did you treat people through the pandemic? It's not over yet. So how people are being treated now will be how employees and how candidates perceive the company moving forward. And if you return to the office in the wrong way, in a way that's not aligned with what your people need, not just what they want, but what they actually need at this point, because we're getting into that aspect of Maslow's hierarchy where it really is needs, that can really set you forward or set you back moving forward.
Okay, so that concludes our show today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. This is G&G, Gail and Gurpreet signing off. We'll be back next week with another great topic. So until then, keep safe, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Bye.